Okay, so we'll get started. I believe Sean did call us to order before he left, did he? No? Yeah? Okay. Good. Oh, I see now. Okay. Okay. All right, looking to see if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we'll move forward. No delegations. We look to request any items from the consent agenda. Seeing no requests, we'll continue through the process of the motion. Councillor Redmond. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Galloway. All those in favor? So moved.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Are we missing something?
Could I just wanted to point out, and I'm sure Council fully read and digested this, but item 4.7, item 4.6. This has come up a few times. Councillors have asked if we could change the release date of reports so that there's more time between when the agendas are released and the committee and council dates. And so the report you just approved would change that so that basically agendas would be released a week before the committee meeting. So Tuesday release for committee meetings, Wednesday release for council meetings. Our suggestion is we try that out for the duration of 2019. See how that goes. We'll try to get feedback from councillors and others, but that is responding to feedback we've had from councillors, from community members that people would appreciate a little bit more lead time to read, digest reports, have opportunity to ask questions of staff in advance. So I just wanted to point out that we're trying to respond to that feedback that we've received. We think this is a step in the right direction. We'd welcome any feedback that councillors have over the next couple months about how that works. I think Chris would certainly welcome that. And I would just say, please be a little bit patient with staff. This is a change. We'll do the best we can to have full agendas released a week before, but it also may mean that we talk about a supplementary agenda being released the day or two before the committee and council meetings. And so there may be items there that, are very time sensitive and that haven't made the earlier date.
So I appreciate that, Mr. Murray, and I certainly noticed it and was grateful for it because of last night's reading. I thought you were saying you're missing because she's working with it here. Okay, so are we ready? Okay, so that being said, we've accepted all of the consolidated agenda items. We'll move on to the regular agenda. And the first item up for discussion is St. John's Kilmarnock School request for deferral of regional development charges. The report is for, or the recommendation is in front of us. Oh, sorry, I have it moved. Thank you, Councillor Rentz, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All of those in favor? Oh, sorry.
Hi there, Chair. So we've moved past, I guess.
Just a second.
Oh, there we go. We've moved past 4.1 already, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Did you?
It was like an hour ago.
Yeah. Were you on the phone or were you? Do you want us to go back to it?
Yeah, I had a question. So, yeah, because I had a question. So you just approved that, but moving back.
I think we can do that. We can accommodate that.
Sure. Yeah, it was just with regards to the tenders and quotations, 4.1. And I thought this was probably the appropriate place to ask this question, but I did note the building renovation for Sunnyside Day program. We had received 3 bids, and I'm just wondering if staff can answer my question, or at least I guess where I'm going with this is now that the rules have changed in July on, opening up our IC&I sector to more eligible bidders, have we notified, an approved vendor list of those changes, that requirement that was there for the previous few years is no longer there? Have we made any efforts to, I guess, proactively to educate our bidding pool that in fact these rules have changed to attract more bidders? I noticed that likely was under the old rules, but assuming our new projects that'll come before council will be subject to the new ones, it'll have opened up the bidding pool. But have we, or will we, or can we proactively put a notice out, whether that be through the GVCA or to our approved vendor list that, subject to, legislation approved, we can now accept more tenders? Can someone answer me that question?
All right, certainly, Mr. Dyer is going to try and respond.
So through you, Madam Chair, I can certainly have a discussion with our purchasing manager with respect to some proactive communication. I'm not sure that we've done anything specifically to date. I think the changes are well known and well understood in the industry. All of our tenders are available for anyone to view on our website. So my sense is there's enough information out there, but we can certainly follow up and see if there is either a subset or a certain group of vendors that we should just make clear that future bids that will come up from the region are open as they were, prior to the certification.
Yeah,
we can look into that.
Perhaps that can be noted for, coming back to the next council meeting. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you for the point. So I can go back to our development chart. Oh, you're fine. It's acceptable. I've done it. I guess are we at all those in favor then? Did we? Yep. Carried? Okay. And now we'll move on to the Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice, the draft regulations. Report can be found on page 102. The recommendation is there. Should we put it on the floor or should we just accept questions first? Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Dyer.
So through you, Madam Chair, so we have a rather extensive report on Bill 108, which has been consuming a fair bit of time over the course of the last few weeks. So just to attempt to summarize, Bill 108 received royal assent earlier this year. The province is now working on 3 separate regulations, 2 of which are the subject of this report, one of which is with respect to changes to the Development Charges Act, and one which is with respect to the proposed community benefits charge. So in terms of the most pressing or concerning matters on the Development Charges Act, we would say that the changes with respect to the deferred payment of development charges for non-residential and not-for-profit housing are our most significant concern. They're relatively minor concerns on the regulation itself. There's some definitions that we think need to be cleaned up. We're concerned about the municipality's ability to add the items to the tax roll for them to have a priority lien status. There needs clarification on who exactly is going to make the payments. And if you recall, for these types of developments, rather than paying a development charge at building permit, the payment of development charges starts at occupancy, and there are 6 installment payments over a 5-year period. And so we think that there needs to be a lot more clarity within the regulation about the municipality's ability to collect those payments over that period of time and who is responsible for making those payments. We've indicated in the report we've done some preliminary analysis on the impact of this change, and we anticipate at this point over the 5-year term of the bylaw that's just been established that development charge collections will be impacted somewhere in the $80 to $95 million range. This is a significant matter that will impact our future capital program and our ability to put growth-related projects into place. So we're continuing to work on that. That, I think, is the most significant item of concern on the development charges side. The Community Benefits Authority, you'll recall that soft services will no longer be eligible under the Development Charges Act. The latest date is proposed to be January 1st of 2021. So at some point during the 2020 year, every municipality that has a soft service development charge, if they wish to continue to collect something, will have to go through a community benefits charge strategy, pass a bylaw, and then collect under that new regime. There are all kinds of issues and questions from a staff perspective around that regulation, how the rates are going to be calculated, how they're going to handle the vast difference in land values, not only across the province, but even within regional municipalities and even within local tier municipalities as well. We're very concerned about the amount of money that will be generated despite the province's commitment to make it revenue neutral. From a perspective of a growing municipality, revenue neutrality is not enough. We don't need to collect the amount of money that we've collected over the last 3 or 4 or 10 years. We need to collect more in the future. Our development charge bylaw, our capital program has proven that out, and that's probably consistent with most municipalities in the province. So certainly from a CFO's perspective, revenue neutrality is not, I'm looking for a word here. It's not the goal we should have in mind. It's not the goal we should have in mind. I'll just leave it at that. Other concerns include how we're going to handle phased-in developments. It's completely unclear at this point how the treatment of the community benefits charge in a two-tier structure is going to work. Recall, the province will be mandated they'll be mandating a percentage of land value that will determine this charge. How that's going to work in a two-tier structure is still being worked on. So lots of concern on the community benefits charge side. I can tell you that we're working collaboratively with the staff at the 7 local municipalities. In fact, there's a group that was meeting this morning on this issue. The province has established a working group that I'm a member of, and we've had one meeting so far, and we're meeting again tomorrow to try to figure out what this draft regulation is going to look like. The recommendation in the report is to submit this report as the region's comments on these 2 proposed draft regulations, and I believe there's a separate report on the Planning and Works agenda that deals with the 3rd regulation on the Planning Act.
Thank you for that. So it's going to cost us more to do the same by collection, right? By the way we're collecting, right? Okay, so I think Elizabeth was first.
Thanks. I just have a question. I don't understand the meaning or the impact of freezing the development charge. What does that actually mean, and how does it differ from what we have in place currently?
Yep. So through Madam Chair, so right now, under the Act and in accordance with our bylaw, development charges are calculated and paid at the time a building permit is issued. So right at that particular date, the issuance of the building permit, we look at the number of units or the amount of square footage that's being developed. We look at a chart of development charges. We calculate the development charge. What is proposed through Bill 108 is that the development charge, the calculation will be frozen at either the time of a zone change or a site plan application. And so the practical impact is if during the next 2 years a development charge is indexed, that index won't apply to anything that's frozen, nor if a bylaw is updated and new rates come into effect, the old rates would still apply for those particular developments where a site plan or zone change application is in place. The practical impact of that is less revenue for municipalities to fund growth-related infrastructure.
So it's the developer would make a zone change application or a site plan application, And typically, how long does that happen before the building permit?
So that's a good question. I may look to Mr. Regier for some clarification for that. I think it probably there's probably a wide range of times depending on the complexity of the application.
We certainly heard from some of the delegations when we were talking about development charges where 10 years was not a long window.
Right.
Certainly, through the chair, certainly the period of time between a zone change and an actual development under construction can be almost indefinite. Once a building permit is issued, projects tend to move quickly because of all of the associated costs that have already been incurred to get to that point. But sites can be zoned well in advance of the development taking place.
So would we foresee a rush on those applications in order to lock in a lower DC rate? Is that a feasible?
Potentially.
I see. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Jaworski.
Through the chair to the CFO, you raised a number of issues regarding collection. I wonder, is it contemplated that maybe for development charges over the period of 5 years that we have to collect them, would we put a lien on the property at some point? Or these are all the things that need to be worked out? It's just very vague at this point.
Through Madam Chair, yes, these are the types of questions that we need to work out. We're looking for clarity in the regulation so that it's clear to everybody what the rules are. We're not seeing that yet. On a similar note, we're I think quite concerned about the administrative requirements that will exist at, I would say, both tiers of government to track and manage and administer future payments. So that's another piece that we're going to have to figure out once we understand the rules. How is this going to be tracked, administered? What happens when properties change hands? What happens when lots are divided? There are all kinds of, I would say, implementation matters that we're trying to figure out right now and have that well documented in a proposed regulation.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. You talked about soft costs, and I think it's in the report. I can't find it at the moment, but those are primarily lower tier costs. Is that correct? I think library services for the townships would be one soft cost that would be applicable here.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, that's absolutely correct. So from a regional development charge perspective, the two services that are impacted are libraries and airport. There's, I would say, the proposed regulation, the language you've seen right now is silent on airport. So it's not, maybe not 100% clear whether airport will be an eligible service under the Community Benefits Charge Authority. I think our assumption would be based on the exclusion list. It's not on the exclusion list, so we would perhaps assume that it is an eligible service. But as we had talked about in our previous reports, I think back in June and earlier, this is a much more significant issue at the local level, and actually for any municipality that in particular is providing parks and recreation facilities. That is typically a significant component of a local municipality's development charge. And at this point, the way the reg is drafted, at a point no later than the end of next year, it will not be possible to collect a development charge for recreation services. Parks, arenas, community centers, pools, sports fields, all of the above. So definitely a significant issue at the local level.
Thank you. From our point of view here, are we working at all with the lower tiers to come to terms with what that's going to mean?
Yes, absolutely. So certainly our efforts to date have largely been in the realm of information sharing. As I mentioned, there's the working group that the province has put together. MFOA, the Municipal Finance Officers Association, is very involved in this. The area treasurers have put together a working group to start to think about what does administration look like? What do the impacts look like? How can we work together in order to administer this once it becomes operational?
Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
I have a question, but just a brief comment. First, based partially on what Councillor Clark had mentioned. I was at a seminar about 10 days ago where a couple of councillors were at in Cambridge on housing, and construction costs are increasing at 1% a month in southwestern Ontario. And so if the calculation of the development charge, say, begins at the zone change, and then we wait for this, there's a significant cost to the municipality, and I think Councillor Lawrence referred to those construction costs as well.
And if I may, Madam Chair, that is precisely the concern that we have, that by freezing the development charge, once the construction of the development actually happens, rates will be paid at an old rate that will not be sufficient in order for the municipality to generate the funds to put the infrastructure in place that's required.
And if I may, with the question, so when a person applies for a regular building permit, you have to have an electrical, a plumbing inspection, those kinds of things, where there's a bit of a hook that if it's things aren't in order, the construction can't go ahead. What creative hooks are we looking for in this, given that basically we have nothing now in the report, and I'm just trying to find it. You said there's the municipality has some discretion on interest rates. How are we, what's the thought on that? Or could that be a hook?
Through Madam Chair, that could be one of the pieces that we could look at. As indicated in the report, the province is proposing to not regulate the interest rate that municipalities could charge on a, I'll call it on a frozen development charge. So that's one of the implementation, kind of policy issues that we'll have to look at. We haven't explored it yet in any great detail, but I think that's one of the items, to Councillor Chant's earlier question. That's one of the items that we would like to, that we plan on working with the local municipalities on, to attempt to have some consistency in treatment where it's possible across the 7 municipalities.
And we also run the risk of projects changing ownership, going into receivership, a lien on them with no way of coming back right now.
All of the above.
Good luck.
I think he needs it. Okay, so that being said, we're looking to receive staff's recommendation. I'm looking for a motion for this. Councillor McGarry, Councillor Nowak, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you for that very comprehensive understanding. Okay, and we're on to the budget guideline timetable. You can see the staff recommendation before you. That the Regional Municipality of Waterloo take the following action with respect to the 2020 budget as net out in report as quoted, dated August 13th of 2019. And the recommendations are there. I don't have to read them, I guess. I'm just looking for any discussion before I look for the motion, and I see Councillor Lawrence.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the motion with just one change, to move the target from 3.5% to 2.5%. I could speak to it if I could.
So we're going to leave that sitting there, or do you want to speak to it now?
I'd like to speak to it if I could.
Please proceed.
Well, it seems to me that the province of Ontario is knocked back our funding by 1%. And the way we're going to deal with it is we're going to increase our target by 1%. I think we all know property tax is the most regressive tax there is. And I think we need to set the target for 2.5. We need to see what staff suggests and where we make those changes. And I'm not prepared to pass it on to the taxpayers without at least looking at it and seeing what impacts we have to make. Obviously, they're cutting our funding by 1%. They know it's going to have an impact, but it's the easy way out for them to do it. And I don't think we should let them get away with that. So I think we look at 2.5 and we see where realistically staff thinks we should be cutting it, and do some work on that. We need to hold these people accountable. I think it's really simple just to cut funding, but it's going to impact a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So we need to see what 2.5 would do for us and then move from there. So I would recommend moving the recommendation with that change, 2.5.
So that is an amended motion, and are we still looking for discussion, or are we looking for our seconder? Is that what you're doing, Councillor Kiefer? So we will assume this motion has been seconded, and then I'm hoping we're doing this right. We'll just kind of keep going around the table. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I was going to likely second that notion. I definitely think we have to have a more aggressive range, perhaps, as we head into the 2020 budget cycle, to at least see where we're going to go. Obviously, we know we'll see some reductions from our funding partners provincially, and we know that is not obviously inclusive of the police service board, potentially any increases that we may see there. So we have to automatically add that. Clearly, we have I guess a service review audit that we're undertaking on an aggressive timetable between now and then, and so I'm optimistic as to what we may see in addition to the staff's recommendations on what a tax impact of 2.5% would look like. So I'll support, at the very most 2.5 and see where we can go from there, utilizing good information and staff resources to come back to us in terms of what programs we're funding, additional ones, and anything else that we can make good decisions based on information and facts, not just arbitrary numbers.
Thank you for that. Councillor Clark?
Thank you. I can't support the 2.5. I will support the 3.5. The reason is that we know to get to 3.5, we are going to have to make service cuts. We know that. We're told that in the report. I think that when we're talking about service cuts, that's something we need to be talking about at this council table. I don't think that's something that I'm comfortable asking staff to go and do and bring back to us in some not that staff would hide details, but I really think that's a discussion that we need to have fully at this table. When we get the 3.5, we can do what we do every budget. We can whittle away at that if we decide we need to. But I want to see the full, I really do want to see the full cuts that we're talking about making.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I'm going to support the 2.5. I think to Councillor Clark's point, that gives us a more clarity on where staff feel that the impacts of the government funding changes will lie. And I think we can wrestle with it. We may not end up at 2.5 in the end, but I think it will help us have clarity as to what the actual impact of those changes are.
Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just going through my notes here quickly, and I can't go through them quickly enough. But I would say, if anything, if we were going to go to 2.5, quote, exclusive of the provincial funding reductions, and perhaps bring that through as a budget issue paper on its own, or maybe the subsequent parts of it, because as I recall, there's a lot of commitments that we've done in prior terms of council, either last budget or other before. They're coming back so much to haunt us because we made those decisions. We've pre-committed that money. And as Councillor Clark has mentioned, that there's a lot of, the wiggle room has dissipated and disappeared. And so making a big adjustment like that on the fly, 3.5 from recommendation of a report to 2.5, including a nearly 1% provincial impact, gives no wiggle room whatsoever.
Thank you. Councillor Galway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm a bit of two minds on this. On the one hand, I like the aggressive kind of context of what's being suggested, but then you have to look at it realistically as well to kind of wrap your mind around it. I appreciate that this is staff's best advice at this point in time. This is their position, and now it's council's turn to modify or accept what they've put forward. I think there's two things in general I wanted to say. One is that I still would like to see a strategy to phase in that 1%. That we not necessarily, I mean, a decision for council to make, no doubt, but using the tax stabilization fund, which is what it's intended for, to see if we could smooth out the that 1% from the province. And keep in mind, there's another $3.3 million next year as well. So that strategy would have to take all that into account, how we might deal with it on a multi-year basis as opposed to a one-year basis. That's a decision that council would make at a future point in time. I also think that we need to, I think this is maybe where Councillor Jaworski was going, is clearly identify the 1% as an item. So it's not unlike what some local councils have done with certain other things, infrastructure tax, or in some cases a stormwater tax, in other cases where it's been identified away from the regular increase so that we could, and we're going to have to make decisions on those things. I mean, are we going to backstop EMS? Are we going to backstop childcare? Are we going to, you know, we know what the impact is, but are we going to backstop it? I suspect that we will in large part, maybe not completely. So I'd like to see a strategy on the phase-in that we might be able to take that 1% down to something less than 1% and split it over a period of time, combining it with what's likely to happen next year as well. And somehow or another identify the 1% as, call it whatever you will. I have some suggestions, but I won't say that here. Yeah. Fix or repair daily. I'm willing to go with the 2.5 so that council will be informed of what the impacts are going to be, and you're not going to like them. And we'll have to deal with that and deal with, of course, other things as well, in terms of some of the other enhancements that some people around this table have been calling for in different program areas. It's going to be a very difficult budget year, but not unlike a year where we had a 6% download. If you go back far enough, we got through it. So I'm somewhat reluctant to do it, but I think it might be a good exercise for council to go through.
Thank you. So, Mike, I know you wanted to speak. Do you want to do that now?
Sure. Yeah, so I just to make a couple of comments, and obviously the primary reason we brought this report forward was to have exactly this conversation at council at this point in the budget process. So this is actually extremely helpful for staff. I do need to say, I just need to point out, I know you can all do the math, but to get from our current budget position, which is about a 4.6% tax rate increase, down to a 2.5% tax rate increase would require, I'm going to look to Craig, somewhere between $10 and $12 million of budget reductions. And so you can all speculate on what would be required to find $10 to $12 million of spending reductions in the region's budget. And so I just want you to be aware that that's the magnitude that we're looking at. If that's council's direction, then that does give staff clear direction on the work to be done, and we will absolutely bring back options that will make up that $10 to $12 million spending gap. And then council will have to deal with the implications of those options. So I want you to understand the math. We are in council's hands, and that is why we brought this report forward today.
Thank you. Mr. Murray. Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much. And Thanks to Councillor Rents for bringing the amendment forward. And just to be clear, the amendment that you're talking about is separate from whatever increase comes as a result of the police services budget, correct? Okay. And in that context, then, I am prepared to support the amendment that's being brought forward. I think it will give us an opportunity to have number one, it brings it in line with the rate of inflation, which is something that I know many of us talked about in the last election. Where possible, and there's obviously outside factors because of the province that are going to impact on that. But I think that's something that, as Councillor Galloway just indicated, we need to be able to have some of those conversations and then make those decisions around this horseshoe. But I will say, I'm hopeful that the things that are brought on the table, quite frankly, are not simply looking at the social services issues, which we know, will tug at council's hearts and get the community out in large numbers, and council won't, will be less inclined to make some of those adjustments. I think we need to look hard at some of the other areas, because I think, when I compare, some of the staff growth that I've seen in my time here at the region versus, at the lower tier municipality, and I get it, it's different services, but those numbers have been different, and maybe rightly so, but I think, in some of those other areas, we need to maybe take a little bit of a harder look.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks very much for chairing the committee in my stead. And I support the amendment at 2.5%. That's the number that I had in mind, and that's the number that I had shared with Mr. Dyer and Mr. Murray a week or so ago when we had a discussion on this report. And they did what staff do, and that is they put forward a number that they felt much more comfortable with. But as Mr. Murray said, it is in our hands. And I think it's important that we establish a target that's a little bit lower than higher, so we can go through the exercise and really have a close look at some of our spending. And I know we're experiencing some impacts from the province, which is difficult for us to deal with. But when you look at page 131, and you look at the chart on page 131, you'll see that our property tax levy right now is $370 million. And then the net property tax levy before the cuts from the province goes to $395 million. So that's an extra $25 million of our own doing, of our own increase in budget. So we have some control over those lines and less control over some of the other lines. But as I shared with staff, is that I think the first place we need to have a look at is on those budget line items. So the incremental 2020 impacts for operating items, 10.7 million. I don't know what that is. I don't know how much flexibility we have to make that number any less. Amortization of 2019 budget issue papers. Well, I think we're locked in for that. Final year of RTMP funding strategy. Do we have some flexibility around that? Capital projects, RDC exemption, I think we're locked in there. There's also $4.6 million for new service expansions. That's built in to this base budget. And then you add on top the $4.9 million for the province. But I thought it was interesting that this draft budget includes $4.6 for service expansions, plus we're going to absorb the $4.9 million hit from the province. So my view is that it's going to be difficult, but I think there's some room for us within those broad budget lines to take a really close look and see if we can find some savings to bring our tax increase in a little bit lower. The other thing I would add
is the 2.5%. If we hit that range, you have to add assessment growth on top of that to look at what our total increase in spending is going to be, which will actually be another 1% probably of the 1.5, because 0.5 will go to police more or less. So we're still looking at increasing expenditures next year in a budget cycle where we have received a significant hit from the province. So I think we need to sharpen our pencils a little bit more. Staff will do that. We're going to have to make some tough decisions, but I think there's some money there that we can find to bring that tax rate increase down to something that's more reasonable. So I support the direction in which we're heading at 2.5%. And that is an upper level of a range, doesn't include police, doesn't include assessment growth. So I think if we hit that number, we will have done a good job. I think 3.5 is just a little bit outside of a range that I don't feel comfortable with, and I'm sure many around the horseshoe apparently don't feel comfortable with either. So thanks to the mover and seconder for bringing that forward, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Councillor Galway.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Strickland's made some very good points, and I did want to highlight one of them, the $4.6 million that he referred to as service enhancements is essentially, as I understand it, coming from various master plans that we have approved as council. So paramedic, transit master plans where we have already approved them. That does, just so you're aware that we would have to then reconsider those master plans, and we may have to pull back on implementing. So that's where I said earlier, you're probably not going to like some of the solutions, but indeed there is an imperative here that we have to deal with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Strickland.
You know, it's easy for us to focus on the more sensitive ones. Sure, there's a paramedic master plan, and I think we've already made a decision in the last few weeks about continuing to support the implementation of the master plan for paramedic services. But there's also a transportation master plan where we've spent a tremendous amount of money on transportation and GRT bus services in ION over the last 10 years. Maybe now is the time when we scale back on that a little bit. You know, years ago when we had severe budget pressures, we reduced our expenditures on roads. So there's lots of options within a budget of over $1 billion and where we can look at saving money. And some of those options are more sensitive than others. So I think it's important that we look at the whole spectrum of services that we deliver and all of the master plans that are in place, and not just focus on the ones that are more sensitive with respect to delivering services to people directly, like paramedic services.
We're not there yet. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Further to Councillor Strickland's comments, and it's basically what I said before, but I think it's really important that we have a chance to look at all of the potential reductions in their entirety and not, you know, the master plans we approve in principle and like the direction it's going, but we haven't had a chance to look at all of those in the entirety and also inclusive of the decrease in the provincial funding. And so I do like the idea of providing budget issue papers to cover off some of those things going forward, but I support the 2.5%. We tend at our council to go low and ask staff to provide us reasons to go higher, and it's difficult, it's not easy, but it really makes you look at where you're spending and how you can be more efficient.
And so just before we get to the vote, before I was asked to be chair, I was giving it some thought as well. And I think the disruption of what we're doing with this 3.5 going down to 2.5, as much as it's staff that wears that pressure, I think the disruption might bring us some creative or innovative solutions, like I'm hearing in some of the other communities. St. Catharines is now looking at the way they deliver emergency services, and you know, I'm not suggesting our staff don't always do that. I think we are very blessed with people who are continually analyzing how we deliver service, but just maybe the disruption will be enough of a force that we just might think of something or a few things that are truly going to redefine how we do business here. Okay, so I'm going to call that vote, and it is a recorded vote. Is that correct? Oh, we better give Terry a minute. Oh, sorry. Would you like to hear the amended? Vote? Okay. The Regional Municipality of Waterloo take the following action with respect to the 2020 budget as set out in the report, as noted, dated August 13th, 2019. And the first one is to direct staff to develop the 2020 regional operating budget to achieve a targeted tax impact in the range of 2.5% of regional programs, inclusive of an estimated 0.9% impact from the provincial funding reductions. Now, that's how I have it in my mind. Am I missing anything? It's the staff recommendation. What, to
3.5 changes to 2.5.
Yeah. Yep, okay. So that is, as I see it, you're good? Okay. All right, so you ready for the recorded vote? All right, then I'll say, drum roll. Oh. We're gonna have to do handies. Sorry. Oh. So what did everybody do this summer?
I have a 4-page brief.
Okay. So that's what you want me to? Okay, so those in favor of the amended recommendation put forward, amended recommendation to staff's recommendation put forward by Councillor Lorentz and seconded by Councillor Kiefer, please stand.
Those against, please sit.
So you're good? Officially, should I do those opposed? Make Elizabeth stand? And officially, those opposed, please stand. Or you could do a dance, or you're good? Okay. All right. And we are on to information or correspondence? Oh, did you want to speak, Mike? Mr. Murray?
Just one comment. I'm assuming that motion included parts 2 and parts 3 also, and in particular, part 3 about the schedule. We're
Yes.
assuming that, and I just think it's important council be aware of the schedule you just approved, which would have budget approval happening kind of third week in January.
Fair enough. Any concerns about that? Questions, comments, concerns? Guess you're not going to have a nice Christmas. Sorry, extra work, but. Okay, so then we're on to no other information. I don't see any council inquiries. No other business. Next meeting, September 10th of this year. I now need a motion to go into closed session, please. Councillor Redmond, Councillor Kiefer, all those in favor? Into closed we go. I now need a motion. Well, I guess I'm adjourning after the closed, right? So we're good. Thank you.